Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between. You are watching the Sacred Trial, a qualifier, online invitational qualifier for the Insomnia True Silver Championship, presented to you by Game. My name is Sol, joined, as always, by Alexander Raven Baguli. Is it Baguli or Bagley? I've never it's Bagley, right?
I was like, he's going to butcher my second name on purpose. I knew it. It's Bagley. Just so you know, for future reference.
I mean, we can't trust you to pronounce Shaman properly, but we can probably trust you to pronounce your last name, right?
Don't make me link you the dictionary thing. I'll do it.
Okay. Anyway.
But we are here with a fantastic tournament, guys. And we have coming up next is going to be Lifecoach versus Ostkaka. So, again, we mentioned how stacked this tournament is. That's no surprise. But this is truly a battle of titans. We have the current world champion versus, one of the most meticulous and best players we've seen in Hearthstone overall. And definitely one of the most entertaining as well.
Yeah, I love watching Lifecoach. It's a balance between, sometimes wishing he'd get on with it and do something. And, when he does do something, his reactions to whatever happens in a game of Hearthstone are well worth watching. It's a shame that we're not going to see any of that with the webcams today, but still, he's a fascinating player to talk to about the game. He's a fascinating player to watch play, and he's one of the most unique thinking players in regards to Hearthstone that I think we have. But as you mentioned, of course, Ostkaka, you run out of superlatives for how good this guy is. He won the World Championship, and that was not a fluke, but what I will say is that he's kind of failed to back up that momentum since then. I think took some deliberate time off from tournaments, didn't really enter too much for a while. And the stuff that he's entered since then, he hasn't really set the world on fire. But still, everyone that you talk to will tell you exactly how good Ostkaka is at this game, and that he thinks about the game on a level that's kind of separate from just about everyone else in Hearthstone.
Yeah, and speaking of Ostkaka, he did actually get top 16 at the previous EU prelims. For the Spring Championship for HCT. So, he's been performing okay. It was just one game off, so didn't quite make it to top 8, but a good performance all around. But I think here he'll be really looking to make a splash and an impact again. As you said, just not had too many great results so far, but definitely, you can't count him out. And just talking about Lifecoach, one of my favorite things is he comes across as like a hyper serious guy when he's playing, right? Like super analytical, super serious, and then he will play a minion and make sound effects, and it's possibly the best thing I've ever seen. It's just coming from him, right? That's what makes it the best. Right? It's so funny. Really love watching him play, and always, as you mentioned, interesting in his deck choices as well. Not one for the most standard decks. He always likes to, say, take an archetype, then put his own complete different twist on it, and not just a card or two here and there. He can change half the deck list, and we've seen this from decks like his Turtle Rogue, which we talked about, just didn't really have much of a win condition. It was just minion heavy. He was like, well, I'm playing Rogue. It's got some good cards. I'm just going to win. Really interesting decisions there. And a lot of the time it does work out, and no one quite understands why, but he can make it work.
Yeah, so speaking of interesting decisions, Lifecoach is one of those 2 people in this tournament that has not brought a Warlock. 18 out of the 20 people did bring Warlock in their lineup. Lifecoach is one who chose not to. He is bringing Warrior, Rogue, Shaman, and Druid, whereas Ostkaka has the Warrior, Shaman, and Druid, but he is going with the tried and true Warlock instead. And if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would put a large amount of money on that Rogue being the N'Zoth Miracle Rogue, because he has been playing hundreds and hundreds of games of that deck on his stream recently.
Yeah, and the sheer amount of play testing Lifecoach does is actually kind of ridiculous. I think he was playing he was playing a Cthulhu deck earlier today, or maybe yesterday on stream, and he was effectively taking a screenshot every single time he could have played Cthulhu and didn't. And just every single time he was like, oh, I can play it this turn, but I'm not going to screenshot. I can play it this turn, not going to screenshot, and then go back and look at every single turn and how it would have changed if he'd played the Cthulhu, and then what the outcomes would have been differently, or potentially would have been. So not a lot of players take as many screenshots of game states as Lifecoach does. I'm pretty confident in saying that, at least.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is there's a lot of other players who kind of go into that level of depth behind the scenes. Lifecoach is the one person that kind of does it public facing. That's what his stream is. He's not laddering. He's not streaming for entertainment. He's not laddering for the sake of ladder. His stream is very entertaining, but that's because you get to see this insight into one of the best analytical minds that we have in Hearthstone, and you spend more time watching Lifecoach's stream, looking at screenshots than you do of him actually playing cards in an actual game of Hearthstone. So for me, it's definitely one of the streams I enjoy hanging out in and watching. It's one of the streams that I learn a lot from, honestly. And like you said, Lifecoach is just one of my favorite people in the scene. I got to hang out with him a lot at an event I cast with him recently in London, and he just approaches everything in the world with this sense of like childlike wonder. Like everything is new and exciting to him, right? It doesn't matter how mundane it is. If it's new information to him, that's awesome. Like he just wants to learn. He wants to know everything. Everything is the most fantastic thing in the world to Lifecoach. So he's a very infectious personality, great person to be around. But an infectious personality is not going to get the job done. What he's going to need right now is to be able to play solid Hearthstone up against one of the best in the world in Ostkaka.
Yeah, and we do actually just have the bans coming through now, and it's going to be Ostkaka banning Lifecoach's Warrior, and Lifecoach is banning the Shaman of Ostkaka. So I was just going to ask, actually, before we saw that, not too much of a surprise, because even if the Rogue is, N'Zoth Rogue or something a bit different, it still almost just definitely has the same weaknesses as a Miracle variant anyway. So I thought, imagine the Shaman to be the ban there, but again, we see Ostkaka not banning the Shaman of Lifecoach, and it'll be interesting to see how that worked out. As for Chaki, it didn't work out too well, as Firebat did manage to get in the last game 2 wins with that Shaman before it was over. But good call, Saul. We are going to the first game, and Lifecoach is playing N'Zoth in his Rogue, and Ostkaka is on what appears to be a Zoo Warlock list.
Yes, indeed. And no surprise to me at all that Lifecoach is banning Shaman, because, again, at the event I cast with him recently, whenever we were talking about strategy, his response was, well, you ban Shaman. Like, you just ban Shaman. Like, what
you just do.
Yeah, well, what are you talking about? You just ban Shaman. But again, that kind of plays into the world, like where maybe Ostkaka builds this lineup to say, okay, my Shaman's going to get banned, and this is the situation that I put myself in. But I know Lifecoach has a lot of faith in this N'Zoth Rogue, and as you said, this is not a deck that you want to ever line up against Shaman, because as bad as regular Miracle Rogue is against Shaman, this deck's even worse because it's just slower, it's clunkier, it doesn't have like big taunt options to kind of sustain that through the mid game, and there's very rarely too many cold bloods or things like that in this deck that enable you to race the Shaman effectively like the Miracle Rogue can do sometimes. So banning out Shaman makes a lot of sense. What's also interesting to me is that Lifecoach hasn't brought his Camel Hunter to this tournament, because that's one of the big decks that he thought was core to this banning Shaman strategy. Is like, okay, you ban out Shaman and you just play Camel Hunter, and then, well, hey, that's awesome. I will say that was generally Conquest strategy that he was talking about. Last Hero Standing course, very different, because you still tend to run into Zoo with Camel Hunter, even if you run Shaman, even if you ban Shaman. So that still gives the potential for Zoo to sweep, whereas in Conquest that would be gone. But Journey for Low, picked up on turn 1. He's going to be looking for Fish and Death Rattle minions for the mid-game. You're really, really, really likely to pick up either a Zarral or Tomb Pillager from Journey Below. I think it's 17% for each to pick up one of those. So you do see those cards with incredible consistency, but seeing cards is not something we're doing at all right now. It looks like Lifecoach has picked up the Blood Mage, potentially to try and combine with that Fan of Knives on a future turn.
Yeah, Ostkaka got a pretty good opening hand, though, as you can really speed this up with a potential double 1-drop in turn 2, which could be quite useful versus Rogue. As Rogue, even the N'Zoth Rogue still has a decent amount of removal in it. Still running a lot of the same cards that Miracle does. So maybe going wider on the board is going to feel a little bit better for Ostkaka here, versus just playing the Dark Peddler down, because he won't be able to play the 1-drop in the following until the following turn. Sorry. But just got to say about as well, like, no surprise that Lifecoach really likes this Rogue deck, because the deck or the games almost play out differently every single time, right? Because you end up with so many weird options from Journey from Below, and just all the weird cards you get off if it plays like Huckster, for example.
Yeah.
Things can get very crazy, and it's heavily decision heavy, because your games are so different every time. So not too much surprise at all, and Ostkaka does go wide on the board there with the 2 1-drops. I really like this play. It means he can be more flexible with the Peddler next turn, and be able to choose a 1-drop he can slip in the same turn as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit more resilient against Coin SI7 Agent as well, which is always one of your big fears when playing against Rogue. That Coin SI7 can be really crushing if it comes out on turn 2. So by going with the 3 minion board here instead of just the 2 minion board with playing one of his 2-drops, he's a little bit more resilient against this, especially since he drops a second Flame Imp here. So even if he wasn't to pick up the Dream Abusive Sergeant, he does just have the natural trade straight back into the 3/3.
Yeah, and Ostkaka does have the ability to go into Peddler and maybe that Abusive Sergeant, or even a Power Overwhelming would probably be worthwhile to knock this 3/3 off the board if it was a choice, just to keep the Flame Imp alive and keep the pressure up. He has Power Overwhelming and Soulfire. So it looks like it's going to be PO. It is going to go on the 1/1, kill off the 3/3, and just continue to guard the board for Ostkaka there and keep a pretty decent board, especially after seeing Coin SI come out from Lifecoach's previous turn. And there's one of the fun cards in this Rogue deck. You play Huckster, and in all honesty, anything can happen from that point onwards.
When I play a lot of this deck, it's a deck that I wish was better because I really enjoy playing it. I really like N'Zoth as a card, like the idea of like a late game win condition that isn't just burst damage, kill your opponent. It's just like utter board dominance in one card. I find that to be like a really cool concept, but I played a lot of this deck, and whenever I play Huckster against Zoo, with 100% consistency, I get Void Crusher. I don't know why, but every single time I get Void Crusher, and it's pretty tilting.
Yeah, I think one of the best things I've done with this deck is actually became Ragnaros himself as as the hero, and had Ragnaros Lightlord down on the board as a rogue. So that's my crowning achievement with this deck, and just goes to show the crazy things that can happen. But nothing too crazy at the moment, as the Huckster is still alive. Ostkaka looks like he's going to draw that Direwolf and just continue to do Zoo things and just get value off seemingly low value cards.
Yep, does have to expose the left-hand side of his board as we look at it, which is slightly unfortunate for him, but it was just dictated that way, the ways the trades had to happen. There was, sometimes when this happens, you can criticize the player for not having the foresight in terms of their minion positioning, but, thinking about how you're going to trade into an Undercity Huckster on your opponent's turn 3 isn't really something you're supposed to consider, so no real positioning issues. It's just the way the cards came out means that he's a little bit inefficient with that Direwolf right now, but speaking of inefficient, nothing really in Lifecoach's hand that looks too appealing. Is this just a Shadow Bolt the Direwolf alpha turn?
Yeah, this is one of the tough ones, isn't it? Because even though when you Shadow Bolt the Wolf, because of the sort of inefficient positioning at the moment for Ostkaka, you just kill. You're stopping 3 damage next turn. But still, there's still 5 on board, and then you've got to deal with the other minions that have come out, and there's no follow-up with the Shadow Bolt Lifecoach can do this turn, so kind of awkward all around. But next turn, he has Thalnos and Fan of Knives, so is there ever even a chance or reason to just actually dagger up this turn and take it? Ooh, is he going for the side? I like this. Sat into Flame Imp. He can kill it next turn, definitely, if it gets replayed, unless it's played with an Argus. But in it being replayed, there's an additional 3 damage to Ostkaka. So that 1 Flame Imp would have done 6 in total to the Warlock. So pretty nice sap there, I think. I kind of like it.
Yeah, definitely don't mind it, but Ostkaka is going to go all the way in here, just jams the Doomguard. It's going to push through all the damage, Rogue down to 7 already. And the preparation pickup is actually a really big deal here. Because that now gives a full board clear to Lifecoach if he wants to take it.
Yeah, it will put Lifecoach on. Oh no, it will just. He doesn't have to use the dagger, right? Because of the spell power. So that is actually huge. Initially, I thought he had to trade in with the dagger, but that's not too bad at all. Leaves him on 7, so still really low. But more importantly, does not die next turn.
Not dying next turn does seem like a high priority. Yeah.
It's normally the go-to play when your option is die or not die. Lifecoach is just taking his time as ever. It's no surprise there, but I imagine anything but the board clear would be kind of crazy at this point.
Yeah, I think he's just thinking about sequencing. So he's going to prep the Fan of Knives first. It looked like he was going to go for the Fan of Knives and then prep the Shadow Bolt afterwards, but this does give him a little bit of flexibility. I'm not sure what he would have picked up that he would have played instead of the Shadow Bolt, because even in Eviscerate, you'd rather use the Shadow Bolt, right?
Yeah, the second prep though, right?
Sure.
He could prep the Shadow Bolt and then go into Van Cleef.
Sure, that makes sense.
So, yeah, and for want of sequencing that affects anything but that outcome, why not, right?
Exactly.
So Lifecoach just showing, mastery of the game to a large extent, just saying, this has a small chance to happen, but it could happen, so I'm going to do it. So really good play there from Lifecoach. Ostkaka, Flame Imp's going to come down now after the Juggler. Kills off the Thalnos and Earthen Ring. That could be very, very important in just Lifecoach's plans of just trying to stabilize. And the prep was one card off. Wow, one card. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and this is just kind of the issue that you run into with this deck sometimes because of the extra minions that you play. And it's really not that many extra minions that you throw in. And also the extra minions are in place of some kind of dead cards in this matchup anyway, like Conceal most of the time. So it's only slightly worse, but you can see it happen where your hand just fills up with minions like this. And minions are just not what you want against Zoo. You need those big tempo plays with your removal.
Yeah, there's nothing too great here. Is the prep feels good normally with a Gadget Zan, even on turn 6 with no guaranteed spells, but you could probably draw into one. But yeah, Farseer kind of needs to come down, but the follow-up plays, like you said, just aren't really there. I mean, do you just have to Farseer Van Cleef at this point?
It's scary. There's also the consideration of whether you need to throw out the prep just to make the Van Cleef a 6/6 instead of a 4/4. But I think with that Drake in hand, the prep might be too valuable in terms of getting you back into the game. I don't think it's Gadgetzan Auctioneer, but it's all a formality. The power overwhelming is going to come down. That is going to be enough for Ostkaka to take game 1, and Zoo is going to take the first game of the series over the Rogue. The Rogue is now eliminated. Ostkaka will march on with his Zoo, trying to continue and potentially pick up a 3-0 sweep of his own.
Yeah, definitely scary for Lifecoach as well, because Zoo's one of another one of those decks that has some better matchups, has some worse ones, but overall I think it's just a super solid deck across the field, and it can quite easily take a sweep. And that match didn't go anywhere near as well as Lifecoach would have wanted to, and he lost his Rogue deck. So what does Lifecoach actually have left now, as he has, as we mentioned, lost one deck, and Ostkaka's going to lock in his Zoo again?
He has Shaman and Druid to choose from, so it looks like he's gone straight to his Druid here, and the power of the Wild indicates that this is some form of token-based strategy, a Violet Teacher deck, more or less, or possibly, so we're looking at either Yogg or potentially the Beast Druid as the two ways that this could plan out.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of players shouting about how powerful the Yogg variant of this deck is, and that even with the slight unpredictability of Yogg in the end, a lot of the time you cast enough spells that it does what you need it to do, and normally it's played from a position of being behind, as it can do things that are crazy enough to come back into the game if you don't quite get hold of it early enough. And Lifecoach, Innovate, Emperor, and Wrath, not terrible, but probably not quite what he wanted. He needs some of that early game power.
Yeah, I mean, the Innovate Emperor combination is never really the worst thing in the world. It is still possibly just a little bit slow against Zoo, but having that Innovate in his opening hand alongside a Wrath is not terrible, because if he's able to pick up a solid 4 or 5 drop here, then he's able to accelerate out fairly quickly. But just picks up the Ragnaros that he sent away from the Mulligan, so not what he's going to want to see. And Ostkaka, drawing as Zoo does, just a big old pile of 1 and 2 drops in his hand, so he now has to navigate the right way to play this out.
Yeah, and this is another really strong opening hand from Ostkaka, as he said. He's going to go with the Flame Imp and the Possessed Villager. Not too much of a surprise getting the 2 1-drops out. He has the option of Direwolf next turn to increase the damage output, or potentially Abusive and another 1-drop. It looks like Wrath is going to go down. Just remove the Flame Imp off there, as Lifecoach tries to stem the tide already from turn 1 from the Zoo.
Yep. So Direwolf Alpha, more often than not, is going to come down here. Doesn't feel that great, just dropping the 2/2 Direwolf on turn 2 and pushing face with it. It doesn't often achieve that much, but no better option in hand. Just seen the Wrath as well, so the Direwolf is fairly valid on the board. But Lifecoach has now picked up an option that he can use his Innovate for, but the rest of his hand says that Innovate is very valuable. But Lifecoach decides that he can't wait and just goes straight through to the Drake here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting play. I suppose the idea is that because his hand's so heavy, there's so many of his lower curve in his deck, he just wants to cycle to it as quickly as possible. And, as we saw in the previous game, sometimes too much early damage with Zoo, you can't really recover from that well, as the taunts just come too late when there's cards like Power Overwhelming in hand to be able to trade up.
Yeah, it's interesting that Lifecoach played that turn so quickly, though, because for me, that was a turn that had a lot of consideration to it, because staring at my hand, sure, Hero Power, the 2/1 this turn is an absolutely miserable turn. Don't get me wrong, it's awful. But then on the following turn, you can then Innovate the Emperor, and that speeds up the Ancient of War in your hand, as well as the Azure Drake that you can play for 4 mana on the turn after. So that one miserable turn to be able to then play the Emperor means that he would have curved out into Drake the turn after, and then had that 6 mana Ancient of War in his hand that would have come down quicker as well. So I think that line was definitely worth considering, and it seemed like Lifecoach had either not considered it or just didn't even considered it on his opponent's turn and already knew what he was doing.
Yeah, and look at that. Ostkaka actually sacrificing a Direwolf there as well. So, choosing to take down the Azure Drake as opposed to just push for some more damage, as that spell power can get a little bit ugly when your next turn's looking like you want to play a Councilman. And it does leave the Possessed Villager still up with his Death Rattle, and with the Power Overwhelming in hand, you're pretty okay with the turn potentially turning out to be Counselor, Power Overwhelming to clear anything off that may come down here. But Raven Idol, Lifecoach, has a couple of options here. Living Roots looks pretty nice. So, to be honest, they all look pretty good versus Zoo.
Yeah, these are 3 of the best anti-Zoo cards that you can pick up here, but Living Roots just kind of eclipsed all other Druid early game spells when it came out, just due to how efficient it is, and I would not be at all surprised to pick up the additional Living Roots here, but he might also value the cycle on the Wrath, especially since it fits his curve this turn. Can cast Wrath and a Living Roots on this turn and try and pick up some additional options, but it is going to be the Living Roots, and I think we're going to see Living Roots come out for 1/1s here, and then Hero powering down the 2/1.
Yeah, I was wondering whether there's an option to play the second Living Roots just to go really wide on the board, but with no 5-drop, the odds are he's going to have the mana to spare next turn anyway. He gets the Hero powering, kills off the Abusive, and challenging the board at the moment. So Lifecoach not doing too bad so far.
That Voidwalker is a fantastic pickup for Ostkaka right here, though. Councilman comes down protected behind the Voidwalker, which contests these 1/1s quite naturally. He is going to go ahead and trade the Villager, it looks like. Might as well, picks up the buff anyway. Not exposed to Swipe, would need an additional Living Roots to go alongside with Swipe to really punish this right now. So that 1/3 taunt coming down has made the world of difference as to how this board state looks right now.
Yeah, this is suddenly looking pretty rough again for Lifecoach, as he nearly evened himself out there. He does have Druid of the Claw to contend the board, but it means he cannot deal with the Councilman. This is kind of awkward. If you Druid of the Claw into Taunt, you just feel like you're just running, with so many options for the Warlock, just running into some form of trade-up from Ostkaka here. But there's very limited options anyway.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, I'm a big fan of charging Druid of the Claw generally in this matchup to just pick up a trade that you want as opposed to a trade that the Zoo player wants, but right now it's just not that good, right? You get to charge it into a 1/3. I mean, does that really make a big difference? Lifecoach considers that it does, is going to take out the trade on his terms, and by limiting just these 2 minions on the board, it means if the trade were to happen, then it needs to be 3/5 into 4/3, which then sets up for a potential Living Roots turn, but does Lifecoach even want to Living Roots next turn? Will it be Slam Emperor at all costs?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think the benefit of at least thinking about the Emperor is that the Emperor pretty much has Taunt anyway a lot of the time.
Sure.
I don't think Zoo's in the position with only having 1 minion at the moment on board to be able to ignore Emperor. I think it's very limited times in life when you can ignore Emperor unless you're about to lethal them anyway. So at least it does act like a taunt and sort of demand some form of answer for Ostkaka. So I think it'll be okay just planning the Living Roots around for a following turn when it costs 0 mana. But Ostkaka, it's a tough one. Do you think you just go for Flame Imp and Gormok here just because you kind of have to?
Yeah, I just don't really see any other viable play. You'd be life tapping, hoping to hit a 2-drop and maybe Dark Peddler. That doesn't really seem worth it. The Gormok Dream seems to be more or less dead at this point. He's just going to value the face damage.
I do like that, though. Your opponent is going to use that Druid of the Claw to trade. There are no doubts here. So you know what? Get the damage in as the Zoo player. Let him trade into you, and then let him work around it his own way. Yeah, now with the Violet Teacher coming down, and there being a 2-health minion on the board, or even using the Living Roots to kill off the 5/5, maybe there's another option here for Lifecoach.
There is potentially, but I would have expected if we were to see the Violet Teacher Living Roots turn to see the Councilman going down. That way the Teacher isn't naturally contested on the board, so maybe Lifecoach is just considering he has enough life to play with here and saying that this is an Emperor turn for him and just hoping that he gets that 5/5 to go into the Emperor. It would be nice to be able to see exactly how much life he has. It's 20-something.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting at the stall there from Lifecoach, isn't it? Because as you said, if you were going to go for the living roots, it's kind of interesting he chose to leave the councilman up, because now if there's a forbidden ritual, that councilman's going to hit you pretty damn hard.
Yeah, I mean, more than that, it just has this perfect trade left on the board, right? Like 5/5 into 3/5, and if he'd have done it the other way, there was a 4/4 and a 3/2, which at least demands something from the Zoo player in order to be able to deal with it efficiently. So this is a slightly confusing line of play to me. And again, the Voidwalker picked up at a very, very crucial time here to be able to protect that councilman.
Yeah, it seems to be going pretty okay for Ostkaka in terms of these Zoo draws. Does have double power overwhelming, so a hell of a lot of damage available to him, but at 1 minion on the board, even one as powerful as Councilman, still not exactly where he wants to be. Imp Gang Boss and Voidwalker, though, like you said, a pretty good play. And with Druid, you've already seen like the Wrath and Living Roots, right? So there's not too much more damage to come out from hand, at least, if, you know, with the Councilman protected behind the Voidwalker, to warrant not trading the Violet Teacher, I think.
Exactly. You've seen a Wrath, you've seen 2 Living Roots. One of those was from Raven Idol, so there is another natural Living Roots plus swipes left in the deck, but how much do you respect this Violet Teacher, especially when your hand consists of double power overwhelming? Of course, the face damage is incredibly relevant, but Violet Teacher is a card that can get out of hand very, very quickly. So I definitely like Ostkaka's decision to respect the 3/5 there.
Yeah, with potentially generating so many tokens, you could lose control of the board. And you control the board as Ostkaka at the moment isn't fantastic. So even easier to lose. So then the second you've lost that and the Druid starts, as we've seen in other matchups, just dropping those massive taunt minions, it becomes very difficult to claw back. And Lifecoach, honestly, looks like an Ancient of War taunt. There's not too many other options here. Because the rest of his curve, curves out naturally. So there's no real benefit of playing Thaurissan, I don't think, at the moment, unless he really values getting Scenarios out the next turn with 2/2/2 taunts. But surely the 5/10 is worth more than that.
You would have thought so, and yeah, it looks like there is the potential that Emperor might just get stuck in the hand here for Lifecoach, which makes me go back all the way to that Innovate decision that I talked about earlier, and whether holding on to the Innovate for that extra turn for the Emperor Thaurissan would have been worth it in the long run, but Doomguard picked up now alongside double power overwhelming, but still, this 5/10 taunt in the way is pretty annoying right now.
Yeah, I imagine this turn's going to be the Villager, the double PO. Do you think the Councilman's going to stay up and double PO onto the Imp Gang Boss? The minion it spawns will actually buff the Councilman again, and he can just whack him in the face pretty hard and have the Doomguard to follow up. So kind of negate the having to use the double power overwhelming to a certain extent by having the Doomguard on demand for 5 damage next turn.
Sure. The double power overwhelming on such a high quality minion as the Imp Gang Boss is annoying, but he does get that 1 extra Imp's worth of value out of it, buff up his Councilman. Now he'll just be considering his options, and again, it would be lovely to know exactly how much health this Druid has. I'm not sure if you can. If you can tell, I can't.
I think it's 22.
22. Okay, so he can deal 10 this turn, or he can deal 9. So he puts him to 12 or 11 with the Doomguard in hand. So I don't see a relevant breakpoint with pushing the extra 1 to face. So yeah, the trade seems more sensible here.
Yeah, the 1 damage didn't make enough of an impact, especially because with the 5 from the Doomguard, the Councilman kind of dies or it doesn't, right? You know, that's going to define the game, and we see Ragnaros not kill the Councilman there. Lifecoach hits concede as Ostkaka takes this matchup so far 2-0, so he's got 1 more game to win, and he has Zoo plus the rest of his decks left. So Lifecoach only having his Shaman left now, and as we mentioned earlier, Zoo is probably one of the only decks at the moment that has, like, what I would say a good matchup versus the Shaman. Maybe Dragon Warrior as well.
Yeah, certainly does. I mean, one of the things that first initially surprised me when I was looking at all this Data Reaper info that came out is that matchup is listed as 53% to Zoo. Right? And you feel like it's a lot better than that, right? For the Zoo. You feel like Zoo is really heavily favored, but 53 is all that it comes out as. So it is a favored matchup for the Zoo, but Obviously, you can't take all this information as pure gospel because this is collated from all sorts of players. There's rank 25, rank 20 players that are thrown into this mix as well that's collating data from. So it's not necessarily the win rate between two high-quality players, but still, I think we can all agree that Zoo is favored. Shaman does have some draws that can contest it. And knowing Lifecoach as well, this might not even be the all-out aggro Shaman. He might have gone for a more mid-rangey list, but... Yeah, I do want to... What do you think? I don't think you really commented on it. Let's move off the fence, Raven. That innovate play early on. Do you think the Drake was right, or should we have held off for the Emperor?
So I think because the Drake just died to the board anyway, holding off was the better play. Just if the Drake had a favourable trade, say there was just a Flame Imp on the board or something, fine. I kind of get someone on the board that doesn't immediately die and get the cycle and see where you go from there. But, looking back on it, I just think the Emperor play felt so much more powerful because it curved out the rest of your turns, right? You take one more rough turn, as you said, and then suddenly you can go Emperor, Drake, and then, curve into the rest of his late game. And we are into the next match, though. And speaking of interesting Shaman lineups, I see a Golden Allocate the Windlord in the hand.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing here is that Lifecoach does not have Golden Thing from below. I thought Lifecoach had Golden everything, but he has obviously not had the time or the dust to craft the Golden Things. But before we get into this, we do have a few updates on the games that are going on off stream. Neyman has defeated Orange 3-0. He is the only player so far to pick up a 2-0 record. And Strifecrow has defeated the newly crowned two-time European champion Tice. But yeah, Thunderbluff Valiant, Master of Evolution, Alakia. This is about as slow as a mid-range Shaman list can get, honestly, these days. It's not even the very, very quick version of mid-range Shaman. So this is going to be an uphill struggle for him. But this is, as with most mid-range Shaman versus Zoo matchups, this is going to hinge very heavily on the card Lightning Storm.
Yeah, that's the one card that was going to win you this game. But again, Ostkaka getting off to a pretty good start with the option of double one-drop available, which is kind of crazy. Is that three games in a row?
Yeah, but this is just what Zoo does, right? This is the product of refinement of a deck over not months, but years. This is the time that's gone into making decks like Zoo, which is one of really the sole survivors from the early days of like beta Hearthstone up until now. Is that over time the curve gets perfected. People know how many one-drops you're supposed to play, how many two-drops you're supposed to play. This is what Zoo wants to do every game. He wants to draw one or two one-drops in its opening hand, and it's no surprise, really, that Ostkaka keeps doing it because it's exactly how you build the deck to operate.
Yeah, and he's even got the follow-up of the Direwolf to, further compound the advantage of having the 2/1/1 straight away from the first turn. And now he's got double Councilman and a Forbidden Ritual. So that's going to be really difficult for Lifecoach to deal with without that key card like we were talking about in the form of Lightning Storm. I really think that's going to make or break this game. As at the moment, Lifecoach just looks like he just doesn't have what he needs to deal with this board.
Certainly does not. And as you said, it's going to get out of control very, very quickly. But it looks like Ostkaka is just taking his time here. Considering his options, he does have the Forbidden Ritual play this turn available to him if he wants to go there. Although, looking at the state of the client, I'm wondering whether we might... Okay, no, I was just about to say we might have some spectator issues because things looked a bit weird in the turn transition there. But he is just going to go ahead and Direwolf, pick up the favourable trade. Did have the option to Forbidden Ritual that turn just to get an early test for Lightning Storm down. But with the power of double Councilman in hand, that Forbidden Ritual is potentially insane on following turns.
Yeah, and just making up the really clean trade as well is really nice. And even a Lightning Storm at this point, you have the Forbidden Ritual as the backup, right? If Lightning Storm comes down, if Ostkaka has some kind of read that this is a more mid-range Shaman and not the aggro list, which
turn 2 Totem will do for you.
Yeah, which no turn 1 and turn 2 Totem, either, the aggro Shaman's having a really bad day, or, it is more of a mid-range list. So I really like holding on to Forbidden Ritual for as long as possible, baiting out the Lightning Storm that is going to happen. Like, Zoo baited out Lightning Storms pretty quickly before Forbidden Ritual was a card. So it's definitely going to happen. And then the refill is where you really push the game. It looks like it's going to be a lot of damage available for Ostkaka. And Lifecoach hexing a Direwolf. And to be honest, I don't blame him at this point.
Yeah, it's probably the right decision. There's no way you can just let that board pound away at you again the next turn. But The one thing that you hope after you make that Hex play is, like, please don't have the power 3-drop, because the 3-drops are some of the best targets in the deck to Hex, honestly. There's Doomguard, there's Gormok, there's sometimes a Siege Iron, but those 3-drops are so irritating to deal with, both Imp Gang Boss and Darkshire Councilman, that quite often getting the Hex out on one of those is a premium target. And to Lifecoach's dismay, Ostkaka has all of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, and guess what? Ostkaka can choose, but I like the Councilman just because he has the option of Forbidden Ritual or just stacking another 3-drop next turn. Get that Councilman revved up, because the earlier you get it on the board, the earlier its damage is going to get buffed up to probably uncontrollable levels, and you've just seen a Hex, as you said. So Ostkaka in a really strong position, even now, has a Defender of Argus, and if he wants, he can get some use out of that Toad and buff it up just a little bit.
Can do, yeah. Be interesting whether he goes with the Argus play this turn, whether he goes with the Ritual. Like you said, it's possibly a little bit too early to commit the Ritual, because you're still playing the Lightning Storm dance here. But this allows the trade with the Divine Shield and the 2/2. Interesting that he went this way and didn't buff the Frog, which was the play that I was looking at. The Argus on the other side of the Squire, making the same trade. Because what's the difference between 6 health and 5 health in this situation? Lava Burst, potentially, but that's not a card that you'd be expecting to see based on how slow this Shaman has been operating so far.
Yeah, I think the idea will be, because he's seen a Hex so early, the odds on a second one are as low as they're going to be, right? So he's just putting as much health and power behind this Councilman as possible, just to say you have to, like, overcommit to kill this one Councilman, and guess what? I've got another one. An Imp Gang Boss and a Forbidden Ritual. If you go all in and, like, things like double Rock Biter or something crazy, or like you said, Lava Burst plus some more damage, that's a very heavy commitment to a 3-drop when you have more in hand as the Warlock. So I kind of like it. As I was kind of with you, I thought the buff was going to go on to the Frog on the other side of it, but no, I kind of like this play. Just make the Councilman as difficult as possible to remove.
Sure. So Lifecoach is just scrambling away trying to generate some sort of board presence here. He does have some very high value cards in his hand with the Fire Elemental, the Thunderbluff Valiant, but Thunderbluff Valiant is nigh on useless if you can't build a board of totems to gain tempo with against an aggressive deck like Zoo. And the Fire Elemental will only address a single minion, which with as wide as a board as Ostkaka has right now is not going to be good enough. So he just makes kind of the most awkward play that he can with the big Flame Tongue totem using Primal Fusion and the additional totem, and he's just trying to slow down, do a little bit of damage to some of these minions, possibly set up a Fire Elemental for the following turn, but it's definitely not looking pretty. That was a play that Lifecoach would have been gritting his teeth that he had to make.
Yeah, and what do you think about Ostkaka's hand now? He has the option of Dark Peddler to then play into a 1-drop, maybe something like Abusive Sergeant or Power Overwhelming to use this Frog and get it off the board, because at the moment it's just a bit of a pain, because you want the board space to be able to buff the Councilman. Okay, I was going to say, or he can play the Councilman first, play the Dark Peddler, and then just move on afterwards with the following turns afterwards with the 1-drop he's going to get from the Peddler. And your favourite card there in the middle, Sol, so I'm guessing we're not egging for that one. And he picks it.
I was going to say, I think Shift to Xeris is actually the pick here. You don't really need another Possessed Villager. Your board already exists to the point where it wins the game. So what you lose to here is some utter nonsense, like Elemental Destruction this turn, followed by like Lava Shock, Lightning Storm on the next turn when you refill, something like some absolute level of madness. And then at that point, you don't really want like piddly zoo minions in your hand. You want something big and powerful to drop, having seen a Hex being used. So I think Shift to Xeris is actually pretty reasonable pickup in that spot.
Okay, I'll make
just don't put it in your deck.
No, I'm going to record bits of that clip. I'm going to record bits of that clip and then just cut it together. We'll be fine. And then it'll just be you saying Shift to Xeris is really good. And then just play it over and over again. But anyway, getting back to the game, I completely agree with you. There has to be some crazy levels of ridiculousness for Lifecoach to survive here. And I think he knows it, but definitely not one to not continue out a game. Lifecoach wanting to play every single turn he can to give him even just a tiniest of % chance of winning the game.
All right. Feral Spirits is a reasonable pickup. It gives him a bit of delay to get through to that likely was going to say likely Lightning Storm that he has, but then got immediately distracted by, I think that's Halazeel that Xeris has just decided to turn into. So just going to taunt the Shaman here with a 4/6 minion. So he can play an 8/8 and a 4/6 this turn if he would like to. That seems fun.
Yeah, it seems like a fairly reasonable turn. And he can still deal with everything on the board. So, yeah, seems pretty good. Are there any other realistic options here for Ostkaka? So you can trade a lot in and then just go Forbidden Ritual if he really wants instead of playing the Halazeel, which could work as well, just to buff these councilmen into sort of ridiculous levels. It's like he's just hovering over the gang boss. Does
he actually potentially have lethal there with the if he clears his board by trading into the 2/2/3s and then Forbidden Rituals to buff up both? I mean, I can't rebuild the board state now that it's gone.
I think before the Forbidden Ritual was it 7 and 6 on the councilman as he played the Sea Giant.
No. It was like 6 and 3 or something like that.
Oh, was it that low? Oh, I thought it was higher. Okay.
Yeah, like the 7 might be right, but the second councilman was played recently.
Oh, was it lower? Okay.
It's only like 3 or 4.
Okay. Still, a lot of
damage. But the important thing is that Ostkaka has swept a series with Zoo. So we talked about last Shaman standing at the beginning. It wasn't the Shaman that got the sweep done for Ostkaka, but it was, if you like, the second power deck in the format. It was the Zoo that got the job done. Lifecoach bringing the slower Shaman wasn't able to get the job done. And Ostkaka's decision to leave the Shaman up, as we talked about at the start of the series for Lifecoach, paid out in spades for him because he knew that he had the lineup, even if it was the face Shaman, he knew he had the lineup to beat it.
Yeah, and just looking at Lifecoach's lineup in general, it looks like it is pretty weak to Zoo, to be honest. If his Warrior's banned out, then there's Rogue, which is an okay matchup, especially if he's against a slightly different style of Rogue that Lifecoach that definitely helped. But then like Druid and Shaman, which, Zoo's going to perform pretty well overall. So really interesting there. But we do have a next match coming up, which is going to be RDU versus Dog. So again, just yet another just massive game coming up soon.
Yeah, and that is, in terms of this franchise, the Insomnia True Silver Championship Series, that is about as big a game as you get because that is the winner of the first True Silver Championship, versus the runner-up of the second edition who lost to UK player Ness in the final. So that is two of the most successful players in the Insomnia True Silver Championship going head-to-head for you. But let's catch up with the rest of the off-stream games. Let's take a look at how the groups have progressed while we were watching Ostkaka zoo his way to victory there. What's standing out for you here in this second round of games?
Yeah, so we see Ostkaka did take the win, as we just saw on stream. We did mention Strivecrow taking a 3-0 over Tice. Neyman continuing the victories there with the 3-1 over Orange. Dog beating Hoy, so Hoy definitely not having the best of times at the moment. And we do know that Dog is coming up next versus RDU, who won versus AK Wonder in the previous round. And Gara actually losing to AK Wonder as well. So everyone's in a bit of an odd spot at the moment. We have a fean players there. Obviously, not all the games are done yet. But a lot of players at 1-1 or 1-0 or 0-1 at the moment. So everything to play for. But definitely Neyman and Ostkaka sticking out as the first 2-0 players at the moment.
Yeah, and conversely, Orange and Hoy are the first two players to go 0-2. So they're in a big mess already. Of course, only 2 games more to play for each of them. And it's worth saying that you don't need to have a spectacular performance in these groups to still have a shout in qualifying, because the group winner goes through automatically, but then a big chunk of the remaining group does go through to fill out that bracket tomorrow.
Yeah, I've just got some more updates as well, as they will be on the bracket soon. But it's like Firebat... It played 3-0 versus 6-0, I think. Just some confused information there. But also, I believe Eloise did beat ECOP 3-1. So, Eloise is now joining the 2-0 club after the first 2 rounds. So, really crazy game so far.
Firebat goes out to 2-0 as well. Yeah. So, we are the groups are taking shape. Of course, that winner's spot in the group is the coveted one. That's what gets you there straight away. That's what everyone will be vying for. All of the remaining qualifiers from the group will have to go through to a bracket tomorrow to fight for the remaining spots. Of course, this is a qualifier for Insomnia True Silver Championship number 3, where they will go straight through to the top 16 to be joined by the qualifiers for the Swiss. But we are going to go to another very short break, and then we'll be back with just another monster matchup, RDU versus Dog. So don't go anywhere, guys. I'm pretty sure you want to see that. Stay right where you are. We'll be right back.